The 2JZ. It's an engine known to many as being bulletproof.
Picture this. It's 1991. Japan's bubble economy is near its peak, and Toyota quietly introduces a new Inline-6, first in the Japanese market Aristo, that would still be making headlines decades later. No massive press event, no supercar partnership, just a cast iron Inline-6 sitting under the hood of a sedan, patiently waiting for the world to figure out what it was looking at. They still haven't figured it out. The problem Toyota needed to solve. Here's what most people miss about the 2JZ GTE story. Toyota didn't set out to build a legend, they set out to solve a problem. By the late 1980s, Japan's emission standards were tightening. But just as important was the industry-wide gentleman's agreement, where manufacturers unofficially capped output at 280 horsepower. Most manufacturers faced with those constraints did the obvious thing. They compromised. They built something middle of the road that was clean enough to pass regulations and conservative enough to satisfy the agreement. Toyota went in a completely different direction. Their engineers built the engine far beyond what either constraint actually required, then rated it conservatively to comply. On paper, it sounds almost lazy. In practice, it was genius. Because what they left behind was a 280 horsepower engine sitting inside a block that could handle 2 or 3 times that number without breaking a sweat. What makes the 2JZ special isn't that it's indestructible. It's that its failure point is so far beyond its factory output that it completely changed what enthusiasts expected from a production engine. That gap between what the engine was making and what it was capable of is the entire 2JZ story. The block that refuses to die. Let's get into the engineering because this is where things get genuinely impressive. The 2JZ GTE uses a robust cast iron block with strong cylinder wall support throughout. Now, that kind of structural reinforcement is typically reserved for racing engines. The cylinder walls have support around the top, where combustion pressure is most violent, where other engines crack, warp, or simply give up. Toyota put that level of structural engineering into a production road car engine. That alone should tell you everything about their intentions. The bottom end is where it gets almost comical. The main bearing caps are secured with large, high-strength bolts designed to keep the bottom end completely stable under extreme load. That's an approach you'd expect to find in a purpose-built race motor, not something rolling off an assembly line destined for a luxury sedan. The crankshaft is forged steel, not cast. The connecting rods are heavier than they need to be for 280 horsepower. And the pistons? They're cast aluminum from the factory, but significantly stronger than what most engines of that era used. This is actually one of the most misunderstood facts about the 2JZ. People assume forged pistons because everything else feels so overbuilt. The reality is, Toyota's cast units were simply engineered to a higher standard than the competition's equivalent components. Every single element in the bottom end was overspecified for its rated output. Not one of them, not most of them, all of them. And the cylinder head? Those intake and exhaust ports are enormous relative to the engine's factory output. The valve sizes are generous. The dual overhead cam setup with 4 valves per cylinder flows way more air than a 280 horsepower engine has any business flowing. It's like Toyota built a highway and then posted a 30-mile-per-hour speed limit on it. The dimensions themselves are worth appreciating. A 3.0-liter displacement, 86mm bore, 86mm stroke. A perfectly square engine. That balance between bore and stroke gives you the best of both worlds. Enough low-end torque to feel effortless in daily driving, and enough rev capability to keep pulling when you're pushing hard. It's not an accident. Every number here was deliberate. The sequential turbo system. Now, the factory turbo setup on the 2JZ GTE deserves its own conversation because Toyota didn't just bolt on a turbo and call it a day. Early production models used sequential twin turbos, 2 turbos working in a staged sequence rather than simultaneously. A smaller primary turbo spools up quickly at low RPM, eliminating the lag that made so many turbocharged engines of that era frustrating to drive. Then, around 4,000 to 4,500 RPM, depending on the model, The secondary turbo comes online, and the whole experience changes. The power doesn't spike. It surges, builds, and just keeps going. Worth noting, Japanese domestic models use ceramic turbine wheels for faster spool response, while export versions switch to steel turbine wheels for improved long-term durability. Two different solutions to the same problem, both thoughtfully engineered. The result is a turbocharged engine that feels almost naturally aspirated at low speeds, then transforms into something else entirely when you get into the throttle. Driving a stock 2JZ GTE in that era felt like nothing else available. Most turbo engines were either laggy monsters or peaky and unpredictable. This one felt linear, progressive, and utterly confidence-inspiring, right up until it absolutely wasn't, which is exactly what made it addictive. The engineering around the turbo system was equally thoughtful. The wastegate setup, the intercooler positioning, the oil feed lines, all of it was sized for long-term reliability rather than maximum performance. Toyota was playing a completely different game to its rivals. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time. This channel is where we go deep on the engines that actually matter. What happens when enthusiasts get hold of it? Here's where the 2JZ GTE story takes a turn nobody at Toyota planned for. When tuners in Japan and America started pulling these engines apart in the mid-1990s, they quickly realized something remarkable. Every component Toyota had overbuilt for reliability was equally capable of handling power. Massively more power. That cast iron block that laughed at combustion pressure, it laughed at boost pressure too. Those oversized ports and valves, they flowed serious air when you started asking them to. That forged crank and beefy rods, they handled torque figures Toyota's engineers had never put in any specification document. The first milestone fell quickly. Stock turbos were the bottleneck. Swap them out for a single larger unit, remap the fueling, and suddenly, you were looking at 500 to 600 horsepower from a completely unopened engine. The block didn't care. The head didn't care. Nothing moved, nothing cracked, nothing failed. Push further into the 650 to 700 horsepower range, and you're genuinely approaching the limits of the factory internals. Still far beyond what most production engines can even dream of handling, but that's the honest ceiling before you need to start opening things up. Beyond that threshold, forged internals become necessary, but here's what separates the 2JZ from everything else. The factory block itself almost never becomes the limiting factor. Builders replace the internals and keep the block. That tells you everything. Picture this. It's 2003 and a completely stock-looking Supra pulls into the garage. Factory wheels, no body kit, nothing flashy. Straps onto the dyno. The numbers climb past 500, past 600 horsepower on a completely unopened engine. The dyno operator shakes his head the entire time. Nobody in that garage forgot what they saw. For extreme, purpose-built drag applications, heavily modified 2JZs have exceeded 2,000 horsepower, though at that point, very little beyond the original block architecture remains. What survives is the fundamental design philosophy, the geometry, the layout, the basic architecture that Toyota drew up in the late 1980s, and the fact that professional drag teams are still building around it tells you exactly how sound that foundation is. The cultural moment. Timing is everything, and the 2JZ GTE arrived at exactly the right moment. The import tuning scene in America was exploding through the late 1990s. Tuning technology was advancing fast. Standalone ECUs, proper intercooler setups, precision aftermarket turbochargers. The infrastructure to actually exploit an engine like this was just becoming accessible to regular enthusiasts, not just professional race teams. The 2JZ was already deeply respected in tuning circles long before it crossed into mainstream consciousness. Then, in 2001, The Fast and the Furious pushed it into global pop culture, and a new generation of enthusiasts didn't just want fast cars, they wanted that car, with that engine. The 2JZ became shorthand for something: serious intent, real performance, no compromises. The swap culture that developed around it is one of the most remarkable things in modern automotive history. People weren't just building Supras, they were dropping 2JZ GTEs into BMWs, 240SXs, RX-7s, American muscle cars, trucks. Anywhere someone wanted bulletproof reliability at serious power levels, the 2JZ showed up. Its dimensions and mounting points made it surprisingly adaptable, and the depth of aftermarket support meant you could source everything you needed from a catalog. Why it still matters. The 2JZ GTE went out of production in 2005. That's 20 years ago, and the market tells you everything you need to know about its legacy. Clean, complete engines that once sold for a few $1,000s can now reach well into 5 figures depending on condition and provenance. 4th generation Supras are consistently selling for 6 figures. The demand hasn't softened. If anything, a new generation of enthusiasts who grew up watching builds on YouTube has made it stronger. What the 2JZ GTE proved, permanently and undeniably, is that building something right the first time creates value that compounds forever. Toyota's engineers in the late 1980s weren't trying to create a cultural icon. They were trying to meet a horsepower agreement and emission standards while refusing to compromise on quality. Every bearing cap, every port size, every carefully engineered component was a decision made by people who cared more about doing it properly than doing it cheaply. The result was an engine that outlasted its own production run by decades, an engine that someone can build serious power from in their own garage, an engine that professional drag teams are still finding new limits in, an engine that makes enthusiasts feel something the moment they hear it spool up under boost. Toyota built it over-engineered. The world made it immortal. If you enjoyed this one, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We've got more overbuilt engines from the JDM community coming your way. See you in the next one.